Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we're talking new classes. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh come on Taliesin, you clickbait man, click boy, bait click person. You can't seriously tell us that you've spent all week making a video about what classes you'd like to see put in the game next expansion. It can't really have been that quiet a week in Warcraft that you've had to drag out the old, ooh, wouldn't it be fun if we got Necromancers in 9.0 routine, surely? And you are wrong, because that is not what this video is about at all. Instead, I want to discuss an idea that I originally heard Matt Rossi mention on Blizzardwatch, and which I've since talked about on stream, regularly trying to define, and which I think could really solve a fundamental issue that Blizzard face with introducing new classes into the game, in much the same way that allied races solved lots of issues with new playable races being introduced into the game. And that idea, Internet, is class skins. When you start a new character in World of Warcraft, what class you make that character is probably the single most important decision you make. It affects your gameplay experience in the most fundamental of ways, decides your rotation and playstyle, and unlike your name or race or faction, can't be changed at a later date. You pick a rogue, and you, my friend, are playing a rogue. End of. And as a result, there are few things more exciting or seismic than a new class being added to the game for players, or more difficult for Blizzard. Because let's be honest, popping a new class into World of Warcraft must be an absolute ball-aching nightmare for developers. As if balancing the 36 specs that we have now isn't difficult enough. As if keeping the existing playstyles interesting and fresh and even slightly unique isn't impossible enough. But every 2 expansions or so, you're expected to add another new setup with another couple of different specs into a mix already completely overloaded with different ingredients, and you're somehow expected to turn this impossible mathematical mess into a beautiful, balanced, tasty and exciting cake. And all the time you've got idiots like me shouting, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have tinkers? Blizzard, you should totally give us tinkers. Here's all my ideas for tinkers, and if I don't get them, we should all be really pissed off. Why doesn't Blizzard have ideas as good as what I have, though? But is there a way that Blizzard can give us the excitement of something like a new unique class without having to go through all of that upheaval? Well, I think that class skins might be that answer. And rather than try to explain this with boring words, I think it'd be easier just to show you, okay? Go, 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 go. Let's take a look at a Lightforged Draenei priest. Here he is, the big beautiful golden boy. Now the thing about the Lightforged is, they really like the light, don't they? I mean, the light and worshipping the light and letting the light make them live forever, and seriously always talking about the light and never shutting up about the bloody light is totally their thing. They are absolute light shills, and that's great. So something you may have found yourself asking is, how does it make sense that Lightforged Draenei can play Shadow Priest, who are like the opposite of that? And the simple answer is, it doesn't. The idea of using the Void should be total anathema to the Lightforged. It shouldn't be a thing, but of course it would be stupid not to allow Lightforged Draenei to roll Priest, because obviously they totally need to be able to play as Holy Priests, don't they? I mean, Holy is just so Lightforged Draenei, you know? I am totally feeling that. So how about we create a class skin specifically for Lightforged Draenei Shadow Priests, whereby the spec is still a Shadow Priest. It still has all of the same spells and mechanics, no new balancing has to be done to it at all, but the name changes to, oh I don't know, Vindicator Priest. The overtly shadow-themed spells and talents get a name change to something more fitting too, with cool new icons to match. So Shadow Fiend becomes Light Fiend, Void Torrent becomes Light Torrent, Void Eruption becomes Lighter. I think you get the idea. And here's the really cool bit. You obviously need new spell effects too. So Shadow Form doesn't just become Light Form in name, but in visuals too. Mindflay turns from a lore problematic purple to a beautiful canon-friendly gold. Maybe Void Form becomes Naru Form, and there's potential to have a lot of fun here. And here's the genius. It's still a Shadow Priest. Any balance changes that devs want to introduce to Shadow will happen to Vindicator as well. They are the same class. It's just a cool flavor difference that solves a lore issue that race has with Shadow Priest and adds cool new visual elements too. Because seriously, when have cool and unique visuals ever been bad? It feels like a new class, but with a fraction of the work and future balancing commitments. If you wanted, you could even have a quest line to unlock them for even more class and race specific fun times. Now, I know what what you're thinking, because you've already thought of a couple of problems for this idea, and I admit the idea is not without its problems. So some will say that changing spell visuals would have an effect on PvP, because you wouldn't recognise the abilities that were bopping you in the face, to which I say, nah mate. No one complains that warlocks with green fire are just too confusing to allow into battlegrounds just because their spells are a different colour from pleb, I mean standard warlocks. And anyway, you're going to quickly learn that a light brown Draenei Shadow Priest is going to have a golden Mind Flay instead of a purple one. It's really not that hard, and basically a complete non-issue as far as I'm concerned. Other more serious problem that I see is a bit trickier though. It's all very well and good changing the name of, say, Void Torrent to Light Torrent and giving a cool new lightbound die, but the spell itself still does shadow damage, right? Which is still canonically totally wrong and kind of undermines everything we've just done to make everything cool and lighty. So what do you do? Do you leave it as shadow damage, which feels a little unsatisfying after all we've just done to make the class more canonically sound, or do you change the damage to holy, which could be a pretty slippery slope, considering one of the most important parts of this whole idea is that it doesn't change the mechanics of the class in any way. It's an interesting question. To be honest, it would have been a much more interesting question back in the earlier days of WoW, when the type of damage you did actually made a difference to, like, seriously anything at all. These days, that's not the case, so I would be inclined to change them to holy or fire damage. Realistically, the type of damage a class dishes out stopped having any kind of impact eons ago, and this wouldn't actually change anything at all in practice. So we might as well go the whole hog in creating a shadow-free Shadow Priest and remove shadow damage from it. And there we have it. Our first class skin, the light-forged Draenei Vindicator Priest, a golden glowing reskin of the Shadow Priest. And once you've established that class skins are a thing and the rules behind them, suddenly you realise that there are loads of others that you could apply as well, solving annoying lore contradictions, adding awesome new customization, and which, like allied races, could happen whenever Blizzard wanted it to, not being limited to new expansions. So let's take a look at some of the other ideas that we had for potential class skins. Let's start with a really simple one, Kul Tiran Tidesages, who Alliance and Horde players alike have come into plenty of contact with throughout BFA already, whether that be questing through Stormsong with Brother Pike or battling against them in Shrine of Storms or Stormwall Blockade. Tidesages bend the oceans to their will, harnessing the power of the sea and storms to do their bidding, something which I think would make a really good skin for Elemental Shaman. A third of their spells are lightning based already. We'd only need to change the fire and earth abilities to make this a perfect fit, and we could even borrow the names and occasional spell visuals of similar abilities that the Tidesages use in Blockade and Shrine of Storms for extra flavour. So main attack, Lava Burst, could become Sea Blast, smashing the target with the force of waves instead of burning it. Your dot would change to Storm's Wail, zapping ticking lightning damage instead of flame. Instead of crushing you with rocks with Earth Shock, you'd get crushed by a catastrophic tide. Earthquake could become a Sea Storm with a cool whirlpool effect. Storm Elemental would obviously stay as it is, but Earth Elemental could use the Laminaria model, the huge Kelp Elemental from Blockade. Except, you know, obviously not so huge. Maybe you could have an extra Hex option of turning your opponent into a little Water Elemental. Change your Ghost Wolf to a Ghost Crab, just because I think that would be really cool. Ghost Crab, awesome. And it really is that simple. Most other Elemental Shaman abilities are already 100% perfect, and with minimal but important aesthetic changes, we've realised an existing in-game class fantasy that was previously unplayable. The Tidesage skin for Kul Tiran Elemental Shaman. Except there is one other problem here, isn't there? What do Brother Pike, the Stormsong guys, every other in-game Tidesage have in common that this skin doesn't provide? They all wear cloth robes. Robes that, again, exist in-game already, but which obviously can't be transmogged by our male-clad Shaman. And this is a major stumbling block, because how they look is a really important part of lots of these class skin fantasies, whether that be in a transmog they wear or a weapon that they use, to the extent that when we talked about a Tidesage skin on stream, we thought it might be better to make it a water-themed skin for Frost Mage or even Discipline Priest, just so that they were able to wear the correct religious attire. But Elemental Shaman is so perfect and elegant a spec for this skin that it's forced me to find another solution. An added perk for the class skin system, as well as new spell names, icons, and spell effects, the new class skins can also, when needed, come with a transmog like allied races do. So in this case, Kul Tiran Tidesages Shaman will be able to transmog their male gear into this specific BFA cloth appearance. This system is all about class fantasy after all, and now we finally have our big bad Kul Tiran Tidesage ready to make you wet. Spellbreakers were a Blood Elf unit in Warcraft 3 who specialised in hunting down and executing outlawed spellcasters, using their, let's be honest, totally awesome looking twin-bladed swords to make casters forget their spells. They have made an appearance in World of Warcraft 2 on the Isle of Thunder, looking exactly as cool as you'd imagine them, and the class skin system would be the perfect opportunity for Blood Elf players, which is only about 90% of the Horde player base, granted, but never mind, you know, to live out their Spellbreaker fantasies. So the question is, what existing class would we make the skin for? The only existing genuine Spellbreaker spell from Warcraft 3 in WoW is Spellsteal, which found its way into the mage arsenal in Burning Crusade, but a mage clearly isn't what we're looking for this sword and shield wielding melee class. Matt Rossi has talked about Spellbreakers being a variation on protection warriors, and this does make really good sense since their spell reflect gives them incredibly fitting magic negation powers, but I think we can do better than that. I think the Spellbreaker should be a skin for Blood Elf protection paladins. Blood Elf paladins have always been the black sheep of the light shilling community anyway, so giving them a reskin would be totally appropriate. So imagine, if you will, a Spellbreaker skin that replaces all of those glowing golden light effects with crackling blue and purple arcane style effects. How about instead of Avenger's shield spinning out and silencing multiple enemies in one fell swoop, Spellbreaker's blade does instead. This is not just lore perfect, but also a really faithful nod to the class's original Warcraft 3 animations. Likewise, instead of Blessed Hammer and Judgment sending hammers spinning about all over the place, Breaker's blade and Judgment lets fly with spinning, you know, the sword. You get the idea. Reskin Rebuke as the Warcraft 3 Spellsteal, and hey, you know what? Since this is a skin exclusively for Blood Elf paladins, why not reskin their Arcane Torrent racial as Warcraft 3's Control Magic, just for extra full 9 yards old school feels? Add in the fact that the new Blood Elf Heritage armor added in 8.2 is already bang on for a Spellbreaker, and it's almost too perfect, isn't it? Cherry on top, remember we just literally decided it might be cool to give class skins an extra exclusive transmog if we felt it was appropriate? Well, those Spellbreaker style shield and twin-bladed swords are already in the files, so hand them over. This is probably the most simple skin on the entire list, but one which would be super effective and also happens to be something the Worgen playing community have been crying out for forever. Because yeah, it's cool that big wolfy boys can hold their swords in their massive clawed paws, but sometimes you just want to let loose and go full Gen Greymane on those baddies, proper old school wolf style, and use those massive clawed paws in the way that they were always intended, to proper maul some fools. So how about a skin for Worgen Frenzy Warriors that simply replaces your Titan's Grip dueling wielding attack animations with unarmed claw slashing action? How easy is that? Replace the icons to kind of feral claw looking stuff as well, just because that would be really cool, and at a stroke you have fulfilled long-time Worgen players' wet dreams, created a super cool and distinctive class skin, and that whole process was about as much work to make as a John Wick dialogue scene. GG. Okay, so one of the really fun things about the class skin idea is that once you've established the rules like we have, there's a lot of fun to be had in undermining those rules somewhat. So every skin that we've looked at so far has been for one specific spec and has changed the look of the icons and the spell effects for one specific race playing that spec. But what if we flipped that around a bit and created a class skin that was still for specific race playing one specific class, but the spells all stay exactly the same, and it's the character model that gets the skin instead? Welcome to the Dark Ranger concept. Dark Rangers are undead Silver Moon High Elf Rangers who act as Sylvanas' elite archer assassin badasses. If you haven't seen them before BFA, you've definitely seen them in BFA because they are everywhere at the moment. What with Sylvanas being on something of a assassinate everyone kind of a kick in this expansion. And Dark Rangers are obviously a playable option that the community has been salivating over for almost exactly 15 years now. There's not a new class or race wish list made ever that doesn't feature them somewhere. And therein lies the problem with Dark Rangers, doesn't it? They're not really a class by themselves. They're hunters or rogues, and those already exist. And they're not really a race either. They are Forsaken High Elves. If you made Dark Rangers into a playable or allied race, it would feel wrong to have them be able to play as anything except hunter or rogue. They're just far too limited. Except the class skin system, again, totally solves those problems. How about Forsaken Hunters and Rogues have the option to skin themselves as Dark Rangers instead of the Lordaeonian humans that is currently their only option? So the spells, the icons, everything about the classes stays exactly the same as it is now, but you're playing as a cool undead High Elf, or unlockable at level 120 perhaps, Night Elf, because they're a thing now, Dark Ranger. The models already exist. It would be the easiest thing in the world and cause actual real-life street parties from an ecstatic horde player base, many of whom would happily cut off their own feet to make this happen, except they don't need to cut off their feet because our class skin idea has made it happen. Thank you, class skins, for saving everyone's feet. This is the class skin that got us started on this video in the first place. But seriously, Night Elf Priestesses worshipping the light and using all light effects and stuff? No mate, how about you dick off with that lore abhorrence and give female Night Elf Holy Priests a moon-themed Priestess of Elune skin instead. So all those yellow gold light things Holy Priests do, yeah, let's just make them a little bit more blue, shall we? And all those light-themed icons and spell names, yeah, alright, let's just put in a little moon here and a little Elune there, and lo and behold, we have ourselves a Priestess of Elune, and it turns out it was that easy all along. And actually, we should all be just a little bit embarrassed that this hasn't happened before, really, shouldn't we? Okay, this is the piece de la resistance of the class skin idea, and like the Dark Ranger, does something just a little bit different with the premise, because this is the only class that isn't race specific. Instead, it would allow any demonology warlock the option to reskin their spec as Necromancer. Because again, Necromancer is a much requested new class every time we have a discussion about classes, certainly, but it will always be in that rather awkward position that to all intents and purposes, it already exists in gameplay terms. Necromancer's gameplay would obviously be based around summoning undead minions to do their fighting and their bidding for them, but that is kind of what demo locks already do with demons, isn't it? To make Necromancer a thing in WoW, you'd either have to kill demo or make Necromancers so different from that idea that they're not really Necromancers anymore, in which case what's the point anyway? But class skins, again, solve that. Imagine being able to just play an Affliction Warlock, except it's a Necromancer instead. Instead of demons springing up all over the place, it's your undead minions of death. All it takes is a reskin. Dreadstalkers? More like Dead Stalkers, am I right? Summon Demonic Tyrant? Yeah, summon Stitches. Hand of Gul'dan? Hand of Kel'Thuzad. Demonic Gateway? Deathgate? Shadow Bolt? Oh, well, actually, that one is fine as it is, probably. As is anything that is themed around consuming or banishing souls, which is quite a lot of Demolock abilities. And just think of all the scourgy fun you could have with deciding which undead monstrosities would be the most appropriate replacement for each different demon that demo locks summon. And how cool it would be to make all of those new animations to have them claw their way up from the ground rather than appearing through a portal. It is, frankly, exactly everything you would ever want or need from a full Necromancer spec, and all it took was an optional cosmetic reskin of a spec already in the game. The more I've thought about class skins, the more I've realised what a genius idea it is, how many problems it solves, how many options it gives, and because a new class skin is nowhere near the same level of work or future commitment as adding a new class, just like allied races, new class skins could be added to the game as and when they were ready and not be limited to new expansions. They would be much more likely something that would come with each major patch. And we've only scratched the surface here. On stream, we've talked about Blood Elf Affliction Warlocks, monks having a blood mage skin, since they have the same power siphoning themed abilities, dark iron fire paladins, or rune shaman, a shadow pan monk skin for Pandarans, all void themed effects for void elf priests. Hell, why not a bard skin for certain holy paladins? Okay, I admit I've just thought of that one now, but I'm certain we could make it work if we really wanted to. What do you guys think? Could class skins work? And would you be happy to see them introduced into the game as adding more race-specific cosmetics to certain classes? What other skins can you think of that would help iron out certain loopholes in the lore, or which might just be awesome and fun to have? Let us know in the comments below. Genuinely, because I can't stop thinking about these and coming up with new ones. It's actually quite stupid at this point. And thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make all of our videos happen. They are the reason that this one exists, and without them there would be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Matt Rossi. No, my name is Taliesin, from me and Evitel. Until next time, cheerio.